What if standing between you and everything that you want is everything you've been taught to chase? On this episode of Breakthrough, I'm going to sit down with Megan Anderson. She's a powerhouse in the industry, but she walked away from a corporate grind. She hit the road in a van and found more clarity, fulfillment, and freedom than she ever had before. We're talking raw truths here. We're going to talk about burnout, health struggles, how you can use AI in mortgage, and the courage to bet on yourself. This might be the one conversation that makes you rethink everything. What's always attracted me to what you're doing is that you've always led with this level of vulnerability that I just don't see a lot of people doing, even when you were coming up and the way that you showed the background of your life was really cool. But how did you actually go from this corporate, high level job to doing it all from a van down by the river?
Yeah, it was definitely a confluence of things. So it started years ago, I would say. I was traveling a lot for work. I was doing a lot of public speaking. And I just kind of got tired I was burnt out. I was burnt out of being in an airplane all the time. I was burnt out of traveling all the time, but seeing nothing other than the hotel and some steakhouses. And on top of that, there were other things that were going on as well. One of the major kind of turning points into all of this was I was waking up with hives all over my body for about 8 years. And throughout the course of, years of that, I had been to every single doctor you could think of, every single specialist. I'd gotten my skin pricked every which way to try and figure out what I was allergic to. I had cut out all different foods, all different fabric softeners, sprays. I mean, you name it. I was desperate. Because imagine showing up on every single meeting and all you can think about is you can't scratch, do not scratch. It's going to look weird. Don't scratch, don't do it. But it consumes your thoughts,
It makes me want to scratch more.
I know.
Yeah.
Don't scratch more. You release that histamine. It just gets worse. So the only thing I could correlate in my head that I hadn't tried was I had breast implants that I had gotten in 8 years prior. And of course, the doctor can't tell you that that is the cause or what the case may be, but I was desperate. I had tried literally everything else. And so going through, I went to the doctor and I ended up booking to get an explant removal. And I was terrified, but I didn't really have any other step that I could take. But then all the fears started coming in my head. I'm in my 30s now. I'm single. I don't have a husband. I don't have kids. And I started thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like who's going to want me after this? My body is going to be like completely destroyed. And then I started thinking about it more and I was like, I can't believe I even had that thought. How sick is it that I had that thought? That is my belief that I am thinking. I am putting all of my self-worth into that. And I had a whole history of kind of body image stuff that I kind of worked through. Before I got into the mortgage space, I competed for bodybuilding shows.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so a lot of it kind of stemmed from over the course of years, just believing that my self-worth was dependent upon that. But at this point in time, I was like, I don't want to believe this anymore. And the second that I made that decision for myself, one, my health improved drastically. Two, I started to notice in my life where I was making decisions that were kind of overclouded by a false negative belief. And so at that point in time, between my burnout at work and finally getting my health back, where I was actually thinking more clear and I didn't have this constant brain fog and I wasn't always focused on not scratching, I started to realize other things where I was playing it small. I was in a committed relationship that was going nowhere. And I knew that it wasn't going to be the relationship and the partnership that I actually wanted long term. But I was, sticking with it because it was comfortable. I was sticking with it because it looked so good on paper and to everybody else. And so after I got my implants removed, I just started thinking more clear. So I ended that relationship. Yeah, I ended that relationship.
How soon after did you start to like unwind things from that whole, like once you got the implants taken out, everything starts to come clear in your mind that your self-worth, it goes beyond what you've been believing. How did all the dominoes just fall from there?
It just happened. Once you see something and you become aware of it, you can't unsee it. And so then you have to either be okay with I'm not going to change my life, even though I'm aware that it's not in alignment, or I'm going to take action to do it. And so I just instantly started taking action. I had seen already, I had proven to myself that making the one decision for myself led to improving my health. Now, what's going to happen if I start to make these other decisions? And so that's when I ended the long-term relationship that I was in. And also at that point in time, I started to do an inventory of everyone that I was hanging out with and how I was actually spending my time. And, you know, before we connected here on this podcast, I was actually listening to one of your podcasts where you talk about being sober. And one thing that really surprised me becoming an adult is how much we numb and escape our life. And through the course of all of this, it just became a non-negotiable for me. I don't want to live a life where I am trying to numb and escape every single day. There has to be another way. And
Man,
so
you're making me super emotional right now. Like just listening to you, I'm like, wow, like, yeah, that's a thing, you know, that's a thing that happens.
And I had just, honestly, I had been going down the wrong path for a lot of years. I didn't realize how out of alignment I had really become. And part of that is because, you know, on paper, I had this really phenomenal job and all these things, and people on the outside looked at me and wanted my life and wanted my job and the relationships and what I do for a living and all these things. But I didn't really feel good on the inside. It really wasn't in alignment. And so I stopped hanging out with the friends that were wanting to party and drink every weekend, because that's not really my style or my vibe. And it was really lonely at first, right? To not really have community, but were they actually my community to begin with? No. So it was kind of a beautiful, just like way to clean the slate. And as far as the van is concerned, I had this vision back before I started at MBS Highway, which I've been at for a decade now. I was a personal trainer. And at that point in time, I had this dream. It was when meetups were really big. And I had this dream where I wanted to be the traveling trainer and travel out of a van and do workouts with everybody everywhere all over the US. And I had just kind of let that dream go. And that's when I started MBS Highway, which my mom would call my big girl job.
Okay.
And
you went straight from there to MBS Highway.
I did, yes. At the time, I was picking up extra money, and I was living in Las Vegas at the time. So I was working conventions, which was so nice because I didn't have to go get another job. I just kind of would pick up gigs here and there. And one of them was working Mastermind in Las Vegas. And that's where I met Barry and Tim Brahim and everybody. And they were like, why don't you come on and do sales with us? So I sold everything and I moved over to Jersey, and I lived above a hair salon. And 10 years later, you know, it's been very fruitful and taught me so much. But yeah, so at that time, going through all those decisions, I was like, I used to have this dream, and it still lives inside of me. So I'm either going to live this dream, or I'm going to die wondering what it would be like to live that dream. And it was also kind of, you know, Barry had gotten cancer at the time as well. And it really did remind you that we only have this one life. And do I want to die with these dreams inside me? Do I want to live the next 30, 40, 50 years of my life numbing out and escaping my life? No, there has to be another way. So I'm like, I'm going to start with getting this van. So I had been looking for like 8 months, because this was kind of like my escape route. I knew I was going to like end my relationship once I found a van. And because we were living together at the time, it just logistically made sense, right? So I found this van and I got a flight to Texas, brought my cashier's check, and I bought this van, and I drove it to Wyoming, and I thought it would take me 3 months to renovate it. It took a year, but it's fine. I learned a lot of stuff. I learned how to build cabinets. I learned how to plane countertops. I sanded to where I'd be so happy if I never have to sand a thing again in my life. And now I've been living in this thing for almost a year. It's wild.
1 year. So, okay. I got so many questions, right? So let me start with the most tactical questions, and then I'm going to get into more of the emotional journey of this. But so you know, I was researching you as well, and I had read about how you're waking up really early and you're understanding the markets, and then you do your thing there, and then eventually you then are exploring. So tell me about what your day looks like living out of a van, because at first when it hit me that you were living out of a van, because you know how social media works, like you're in my feed and then you disappeared. And then all of a sudden, I think I actually looked you up. Like I was like, whatever happened to her, you know?
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, wait, I think I remember asking her to be on the podcast. So I thought I ghosted you. So I was like really worried. Luckily you ghosted me. But no, it's okay. It's totally okay because I'm equally bad at that as well. I'm not the best. Like I'll have a conversation with somebody about it and then I'll forget because I don't know which platform it was on. But so you have this job. Like I thought you had given up MBS Highway altogether, but you didn't. So tell me about how you're managing, working and providing information, critical information to people that do, lending and real estate to understand the markets the way that you understand them. How is that working out within your van life? Well, how did you have to connect, build your setup and everything to be able to be successful with that?
I do not have a bathroom in here. Instead, I wanted a full desk. So right now, I have 2 Elgato lights to illuminate my face right now. I have a solid video camera. I got my mic. I got my huge curved monitor here. I have my switchboard. I got it all. I got this set up. It was really important for me to have good video production because, not just the morning update video that we put out every single morning, breaking down to people, but I'm on podcasts and videos and I do live calls and AI workshops all the time. So it was just really important for me to have that camera set up. And with Starlink, that has made everything possible. And, kind of just how my day kind of flows is I start off waking up at 4 a.m. because I work East Coast hours, but I'm in mountain time right now.
Okay.
I wake up at 4 a.m. I do not get out of bed. I instead meditate for half an hour. That is just the best way for me to wake up. I've been doing that for over a year now. It has changed my life. So that's 4:30 by the time I get done with that. And then what I do is I still lay in bed for a little bit and I read all of the news articles that are coming out, everything that we're going to report upon. And I spend probably a good 30 to 45 minutes just sitting in bed reading. And then I get out of bed. I make my mud water. I don't have coffee anymore. I've been doing mud water strong for 3 months now, which is also good for me. And then we all collectively come together as a team by about 6 a.m. my time. And then, we can be on there anywhere from 1 to 2 hours getting this filmed and kind of articulated and built out. And then it gets edited, that gets pushed out to everybody. And then after that, I dive into emails, follow-up calls, creating content, you name it, just kind of the flow of the day. And then I end my day by, again, going out and looking at the news so that I can be prepared. And that's kind of, how my day works. And then I get off by 3 p.m. I do have a little side hustle going on with all my AI stuff. So sometimes I work on that. I'm also working on a book right now, which kind of correlates to this whole thing. It's called Limitless, and it's about crossing off your self-created limits.
Limitless. I love that.
Limitless.
Yeah.
Yep.
So such a catchy. Why hasn't it been done? You're
I
doing
know.
it. I love it.
I know.
Yeah.
And it's about to be in a much bigger way, which I can't share with you, unfortunately, on here just yet. But I'm about to fully embody Limitless. I've just been touching my toe in the water. So get ready for that. That'll be really exciting. And then after that, I work out or I go hiking, depending on where I'm at. I go for a little jog. I move my body. I make dinner. I go to bed, rinse and repeat.
So let's talk about the fact that so I've been, I travel a ton, and every now and again when I do let's just say a week vacation with my family, the first couple of days is kind of like a wind down of trying to disconnect, right? And then finally, by day 3 or 4, you're disconnected. And then all of a sudden it's hard to get back into the rhythm of it because you've now kind of separated yourself from, the habits that you're normally in, or just your environment, right? Every now and again, it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes I'll really enjoy the environment that I'm in, that I don't want it to stop. And so you've changed your environment completely. Do you ever feel like your job gets in the way, of you're you want to go explore, or you're excited about it, but man, but I got to do this 6 a.m. call, and then I got to do this, and then I got to do this. And the passion, and I'm not, no offense to anybody that you work with, I'm just saying it's hard because you're now kind of finding yourself in a different way than you ever have. But the thing that's remained steady in all of this is the job. and the
Mm-hmm.
markets and all of that, it doesn't change. So you still have to keep that. How do you manage that for yourself to be able to shift and change your life, but still remain consistent in the job that you're doing?
It has been an interesting journey. At first, when I started van life, it wasn't too much of a big deal simply because I spent a lot of time by myself on this journey in the beginning. But then I started going to van meetups and meeting more people and traveling to meet up with certain people. And I realized very quickly at my first van life meetup that I'm not the typical van lifer. I have a full-time steady job that I got to work these hours, these structured hours, and it does get in the way. Like I kind of feel like a grandma. In order to wake up at 4 a.m., like I need to be in bed by like 9 p.m., And so that really, what the most frustrating thing about it is being in the van, my internal body clock, I've gotten a lot more in check with it. And what I would prefer to do is to wake up with the sun and go to bed with the sun.
Yeah, it's a good
And
point.
and when you're waking up, honestly, that early, getting behind a camera before the sun has even come up, and I'm sitting here at my computer desk and I'm watching the sunrise outside, and all I want to do is be out there sipping my mud water, it can be very frustrating. It can be, but on some level, you're grateful for it because I do think that having structure is such a great thing. And a lot of people that live this full-time van lifestyle don't have structure. And I think that structure and discipline are very, very important in life in general. Would I change a few things? Yeah. The other thing too, though, I'll be completely honest, is I don't really have work-life balance. So, and it also comes, I think, in part with being fully remote, is I know what I need to get done. And if I mentally need to take a little break and go outside and, hike around for half an hour or an hour, I'm going to do that in the middle of my day because I personally know that taking that break is going to give me the energy that I need to bring to the next task that I need to accomplish. And sometimes that's me working, on the weekends or working at night and doing what I got to do. But I will say that it has been a little bit conflicting the more that I've
Conflicting,
gotten
yeah.
into this lifestyle. Yes.
No, it makes sense. I mean, it only makes sense, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've changed so many things in your life and you're still being consistent with your job. And the job we do in the industry that we do it in is very far from the life that you're living. Like you are light years away from it now, right? Which brings me to this idea that I noticed that you have really leaned into with AI and how you're teaching people about AI. So let's talk a little bit about that. Because you have to understand that there's listeners of this podcast that don't use it the way that you probably have
Right.
used it today or aren't there yet. But how living from a van, doing the job that you do, how are you integrating AI today with what you do?
AI is a wild world and it is constantly evolving very, very quickly. What I do right now is I put on kind of these monthly workshops and it's just whatever my email list wants to learn. I send out a survey, this month we're going to learn how to automate our newsletter, right? But automation is kind of like a higher step up. If you're just starting out with AI, this is what I want everyone to listen to right now. AI, do not let it replace you. It can, and at some point in day, it's going to replace a lot of people and a lot of jobs. I really do believe that. The more that I dive into this and the more that I learn about it, I mean, we'll see how this fully develops, but our entire jobs picture and economy is going to look very different 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. What I would say right now is AI is here and it's not going anywhere. And we are implementing it. You do not have a choice. You need to learn it. And what I would encourage everyone to do, instead of going to a large language model like ChatGPT and saying, write me an email or write a social media campaign, I want you to use AI as your strategic thought partner. Okay, because otherwise, all of us have seen the studies out there talking about how those that use AI, they're no longer thinking as critically as they once were. That's because a lot of people, I think, are using it wrong. They're using it from the perspective of, oh, I just want AI to do this for me. Yes, AI is a tool. Yes, AI is there to do those automated low value tasks for you. My firm belief is that AI allows us to step into being better leaders. And the way that we do that is by using it as a strategic thought partner. So instead of going there and saying, again, write me this email, or hey, I need a marketing campaign or a video script for this, say, hey, I am Megan Anderson here, and I am working on launching my Limitless book. And I want to create a marketing campaign and strategy around this to really create this as a movement. Can you interview me one question at a time to really help dive into this before you help me build anything out? By asking it that way, it's getting the gears turning, right? And it is better at certain things. It's going to take and listen to what you're talking about, and it's going to notice certain patterns and data sets, and it allows you to be a better critical thinker. That is how we all need to begin utilizing AI.
I love that. I mean, I use it all the time for something very similar to what you talked about. It's like sometimes I'm stuck on a interpersonal situation, you know, where I'm dealing with emotions of somebody, and I'm like, I want to react to it, but I'm like, I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to say what I want to say, and then help me work through this. How can I think differently about it? You know, what are my blind spots here? I really try to, and then obviously I don't take every piece of feedback that it gives. I still have a brain on how I want to use it. But what it does, it helps me work through situations that maybe I'm stuck on. And it helps me use it from a critical thinking perspective. But
I love too that you pointed out there, like, help me think differently about this.
Yes.
Because a lot of people don't do that, and they will use it almost like a therapist like that, or how should I respond to this person, or da da da. But if you're not asking it, like, how can I think differently about this, or can you come back and counter argument this? It is taught to agree with you. And
it is taught to agree with you. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to agree with me.
Exactly.
Find my blind spots.
That's when it makes you less intelligent, is when you don't have that other side.
Well, so Megan, I'm going to admit something on here, and then you're going to help me potentially use AI to fill a blind spot in my brain on something. So this will be a little bit of like a personal jam session, but I think there's somebody listening that's probably just like me. I've been in the mortgage industry now for probably 25 years in a leadership position. Now today I manage 80 loan officers across 5 states, and my role is to make sure that we build a platform for them to get their loans through the system. And then another piece of my job is I'm growing. I'm looking for people that are not happy where they're at and bring them here. So we're in a constant growth mentality, and no different from anybody else in a position similar to mine. But the difference is that I have sold loans. I've been incredibly successful selling loans. I understand the manufacturing process of mortgage, as well as I can look at any pipeline and know exactly what's wrong with any organization. I have built a personal brand, so I understand marketing. But what I do not understand is anything that Barry's talking about when it comes to the mortgage markets. I'm not kidding. Like, he will talk, and I'm like, I don't understand. I really do not understand what maybe a very high level of understanding of, you know, how the markets impact rates, but not at the level that you do. And what I think people fail to and I rationalized it by this: the consumer doesn't care about that level of detail in the markets. The consumer cares about, can I buy a house right now? Can I afford it? What's my payment? And how much cash has to leave my account in order to be approved for this loan? But I do think that there's some level of importance of understanding it. So for you and me, what would be your step-by-step process on getting me to understand it over time? Is it using like a model to ask me questions to understand my level of understanding, and then building out the model to help me get the information? Is it subscribing to MBS? You talk to me about what you think would be the best solution on finally understanding what's driving the markets and how to best predict it.
Step number 1, sign up for MBS Highway.
There you go.
Step number 2.
Well, let's go back a little bit. What is MBS Highway in the clearest terms?
Yeah, so MBS Highway, we essentially kind of analyze the financial markets, what's going on with the Fed, what's going on with the economy. We advise when to lock and float the loans. That's going to help you protect your pipeline. That's going to help you make your customers happy. And then we have a bunch of whole co-branded material, like buy versus rent scenarios, what loan should you go with, refinance scenarios, all the stuff.
Okay.
Step number 1, sign up for MBS Highway. Step number 2, we put out our morning update video every single day, right? So one thing that's a hot topic right now is the government just shut down. What does that mean to your clients? Have you actually educated them on what that could mean and how that could impact them purchasing a home? Well, you need to. And so, of course, we come out with video scripts that are done for you and you can just read them and put that out there. But this is what I recommend just for specifically trying to understand the market. Okay. And I actually had to do this too, because I haven't been at MBS Highway since the government shutdown happened, right? So essentially, through watching the morning update, what you can then do is you can open up like ChatGPT, right? And you can say, okay, Barry Habib on MBS Highway said this morning. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to impact the mortgage market or rates or my clients that I have, I'm closing them in a week from now or ones that just entered or whoever it is that you're confused about or want to know about, right? So this just happened. Barry said this. I'm not sure what this means for this client. Can you please explain it to me like you would to a fifth grader? And that's my favorite thing. For whenever I don't understand it, I ask it just to describe it to me in the most simple terms. It'll come back with it. And then it's just kind of a play. What do you want to learn more about? This is when your curiosity can turn on. What are you curious about? It'll come back with an answer. Okay, great. That made me curious about this. Now ask that question and you can go down that rabbit hole for forever, honestly. But I think just doing that on a daily basis on the topics that you don't understand, that's going to help you understand them to a lot more clarity.
That's really good. And you brought up a really good, case in point of what we're dealing with today with the government shutdown. Right now, by the time this releases, it'll be a different time. But, the reason that I think it's important because that just happened. And I'll be honest, I'm not seeing a lot of people talk about it on social media yet. Right. I haven't been on today, but I haven't seen, like I thought about it. I thought about the clip. It would be, hey, the government shut down. Here's what it means for mortgages, right now in this very moment. No, I haven't seen that happen. Maybe it's there, but I think that that's a really good way to understand and start to get your arms around what the markets are doing. And we've been in the most volatile place in the markets, as you know. So tell me about this piece of it. You came from not doing mortgages into this role and then to being a thought leader around what's happening on the market. How did you figure out and understand what's driving rates today the way that you understand it?
Well, when I started at MBS Highway, I was just kind of doing sales to begin with. Now, obviously, you have to understand some stuff in order to be successful at sales. So it kind of started with that. Then where it really got impactful for me was we came out with certified mortgage advisors, which is like a course on kind of analyzing the financial markets. And it's basically everything we talk about in the morning update video, but like how we dive into the research and what we're looking at on these various reports and how to interpret them. And at that point in time, I had been given sections. I had to talk about recession indicators and what they mean. And so I dove in on that a lot because I had to get behind a camera in Georgia with no teleprompter, nothing. And I had to talk about these recession. Yeah, AI wasn't around then. So I had to do this. And, that made me learn it. And also the steps that I just told you watching the morning update. Now, back then I didn't have chat, but I had Barry, which is honestly probably better. So I would just ask him questions. Every time I watched the update, I would go up to him and be like, hey, we talked about this. Can you explain this to me? And of course, he wanted to sit there and explain it to me. He's such a teacher and has such a big heart. Now I ask AI a lot because, he's busy and he's still going through all of his health stuff. So, but I always frame it as, how would Barry Habib respond to this?
It's really good.
And it gives some pretty good answers. But I just did that. And then Barry asked me to start doing the morning update video. So before I wasn't really doing that. I was managing marketing, all of our PR stuff. And then I started in sales before I moved into marketing. And then he asked me to be on the update. And so then it was like, oh crap, I have to show up every day for 60,000 people. And, we're getting this out quick. Oftentimes news comes out at 8:30. And listen, if we don't get that out in like half an hour, people are in the Facebook group. Where's the update? Is there no update today? And it's like, guys, hold on. So it's a quick, you got to go and you got to be able to do it right. And I know when I started, it was just me, Barry, and Dan doing it. And It took a while. I felt so bad for these two gentlemen because they were patient with me. And I know it got on their nerves some days, how many times I'd have to restart or how they'd have to explain things to me. But also being in that position, if there was a day where I didn't understand it, it was embarrassing for me because I respect these guys and I felt like I was sitting there wasting their time. And so anytime I didn't get something, I would take the initiative to Google it. Now AI it. But at the time, that's just slowly how I started learning. And then, I've been there a decade now, so I kind of know what I'm talking about now.
10,000 hours. 10,000, just doing it over and over and over. So you one of the things that attracted me to your story and to what you're doing is you have this incredible way of being authentic. And you have this incredible way of sharing things that, like in the first 5 minutes of this conversation, you shared things that I was surprised that you shared. But that's just how you roll. You've understood that being a brand and building what you're building requires a certain level of authenticity and vulnerability. You can get there and get there fast, then people, what you find is that people are more attracted to that. And
Yes.
I bet that we'll have people DM me or you from this podcast about the story you shared, and we'll say, there was something about that resonated. That's why we do the podcast. But like, even, your insecurity about, your health and how you got there and that sort of thing is really open. But where does that come from for you? Like, and how did you realize that being authentic is the best marketing tool? And it's so easy because it gives you an opportunity to just be yourself. How did you arrive at that? What was that breakthrough moment like?
That breakthrough moment, well, when I was a personal trainer and I had left the gym, I was really vocal on social media. And then after a couple of years, so that kind of got me comfortable behind the camera. I wouldn't say that I was necessarily vulnerable, but it did get me comfortable very early on being behind a camera and kind of sharing aspects of my life because I was somewhat kind of like a fitness blogger at the time to drive more clients.
So you've always been in that space, right? You've always realized
Always.
that
Yep.
you're of the generation that whatever business you have to be online in some
Yes.
form or fashion, and blogging, Instagram, whatever, you were always a part of that.
Yes, but I wouldn't say that I was super vulnerable with sharing things that kind of either brought me shame or I was uncomfortable with until I had kind of gotten burnt out of being a personal trainer because I went to Oregon and two of my clients were competing in bodybuilding shows. And I did if it fits your macros approach because it was more flexible. You can eat what you want. I watched my client weigh her food 10 times before she would eat it. And then she stepped on the scale before, after, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, I got into this space to help people have more confidence in themselves. And all I felt like I was doing in that moment was justifying someone's eating disorder. And to be honest, I felt that way about myself oftentimes. And so I was like, I can't keep doing this. And at this point in time, I signed up for to continue my education through eating psychology. So kind of understanding the why behind why we're eating and the choices we make and how we feel about ourselves. And I was at the graduating class group, and this girl raised her hand and she shared a really vulnerable story. And it was something that I had experienced that I never told anyone. And by her sharing her story, it allowed me to show up and heal my own. And at that moment, now we're like still best friends, by the way. At that moment, I realized the power in being vulnerable is that it just allows other people to begin healing.
That's it. That's really it. I mean, like, that's where, it's hard to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But if you're not, or if you don't, if you're not sharing your story, there's somebody that probably needs to hear it, which is what really, like, it's funny how things evolve, right? Like, you went to that class for one reason and then you walked out of it with a lifelong friend and, changed your whole thought process. But things evolve and the purpose evolves from where we start. But when you think about these breakthrough moments, that really is it. I mean, it's being able to come out, share your story. The implant story for me, hearing it from an outsider looking in and from a male perspective, I mean, think about that. Like, your entire worth was in body image or whatever the case is, but now you're so much happier,
Yeah.
right? Like you're so, and by the way, I would imagine that you feel like your worth has skyrocketed from where you were at that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I reframed it, you know? Before I was looking through the lens of I'm not worthy unless I look a certain way. I no longer have that belief. My worth is nothing tied to what I look like. Now, of course, I'm still behind camera every day. I still
Hmm.
like want to feel good, and that doesn't mean,
Hmm.
you know, becoming a complete hippie over here that never washes my hair, but
But it's
yeah,
on
I
your
just
terms at this point.
it's on my terms, yeah, and
Yeah.
I keep exploring the boundaries with this, you know? Like, I used to get Botox every 3 months, I started doing that in my 20s, I stopped doing that because
In
why do
your
I wanna put
20s?
more neurotoxins. Yes, yes,
Well, this is what's crazy about it, right? It's like it becomes a thing because it's a thing from the
societal
lenses that we're
pressure.
looking. Yeah. And then like, but if you were like talking to if you had to go back to tell yourself at 20 what you know now, and I don't know how old you are,
Yeah,
but like you look really young. But if you were to
thanks.
go back and tell yourself, what would you say? What would be the thing that you'd say to your 15-year-old self going into life that
Yeah.
might have changed everything? Or maybe you had to get there to be here. I don't know. But what advice would you give yourself?
Well, one, if no one has ever done this exercise, I wanna encourage you to. If there's ever a point in your time, in your lifetime, where you experienced maybe a major life change or trauma, I want you to get out a picture of that little you. Okay. And I want you to write them a letter. And I've done this a couple times. No, you're going to cry. Okay. But if I could go back and, you know, tell her, one, I would just start by hugging her. I would just hug her and let her know that she's enough and that she's always been enough. And that really at the end of the day is that's all she needs to know is that she's loved. That's all we all really want to know.
Yeah, it's the human thing.
Yeah, I'm getting teary-eyed over
No,
here.
I know. I mean, I'm like, well, you said this because it's so weird that I asked a question, but like literally this weekend, I figured out how to use Nano Banana, which
Yeah.
is Gemini's graphic designer, I think, and I uploaded two pictures, one of recent and one of my child, of me holding myself, and then I told a story about how, and anybody's interested, it's on my Instagram, but I tell a story about like I meditated one time. And Megan, I don't know if this has happened to you before, but it's, you know how, I don't know if you ever use drugs or drink, but like when you do that, they call it chasing the dragon. It's like you're chasing that one experience that you had and you never really find it again. So you just keep doing it and it becomes a vicious cycle. So that kind of happened with me with meditation. I got to a point in meditation where I went to a different place and it was so vivid. And before I was just trying to meditate where I was just in a calm place, but then I started going places in it and it's hard to get there. But I got there and I was talking to myself as a kid who was sitting on a curb, and I remember in life where I was at that moment, but I was like, what would I say to myself? So I had the conversation in a meditation where it was so vivid. And I was telling him, and I just kept repeating, you're safe, you're home, you're safe, and it's going to be okay. And I remember just like I was able to look at myself and have that conversation and reconcile the worthiness that I didn't feel, trying not to get emotional. And so yeah, like I feel you on that. And it's a weird thing to how like AI was able to take a moment of a meditation and make it real for me, that I can see that moment and mirror it together and say like, we're together and it's going to be okay. And so it's actually, I think it's a trend now, but like I just really you got me to that place again. And I think it's something that everybody should do, to your point, is write a letter to yourself, because you also have to forgive yourself for all the things that you held on to and that shame that you carried around. So okay, so let me get out of this conversation. Anything you want to add before we shift? Because you really got us here in the way that you said it, and you got me emotional. But any thoughts before we switch?
No, I encourage everyone to do that exercise, and I'm excited to check out your Facebook post.
Thank you for that. And if you want to know how to do it on Nano, I'll send you the. If anybody wants to know how to do it on Nano Banana, I'll send you the. Just DM me and I'll send you over the prompt that I did to get us there. But so there's so many people, Megan, who are stuck in life, in their
Mhm.
routines. And, there's somebody out there that's listening that wants to dream big and has this desire. And maybe it's not really like the van life, or maybe it is like, just driving or flying to Texas and picking up the van and remodeling it, or, renovating it to be that. But what advice would you give to the person that's like been on that, like that cusp of wanting to do something really big, but is afraid and is holding themselves back? What would you tell them? And what
They
advice
gotta
did
do
you have
their
to give
limit
yourself?
list. They gotta do their limit list. So this is what I kind of recommend. First, you can't change anything unless you have an awareness. Now, at this point in time, this person that you're talking to, they have an awareness that something's off, that they want to do something, that they're burnt out, that this lifestyle isn't fitting them anymore, whatever it is. So they have that awareness. The next step is you got to be brutally fucking honest with yourself. Okay? There are so many times and places, and it's so easy for us to justify our actions, to justify why we're not ending that relationship, to justify why we're still into that job, to justify whatever it may be, right? Why you can't go buy a van, or, why you can't go on that hike, or whatever it is. You got to get brutally fucking honest with yourself. And the way that you do that is you sit down, and this is another exercise I recommend. You sit in front of a mirror, you look at yourself in the eye. You're not going to lie to yourself this time. You're going to be honest. My relationship sucks and is going nowhere, and I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. I'm burnt out from my job and I'm not enjoying this anymore. I've always wanted to travel, and I've never allowed myself to live that dream. Whatever it is, be honest with yourself, because you're not going to lie to yourself when you're looking at yourself straight in the face. And that all of a sudden, when you become honest with yourself, now you can stop with the lies. And you know what else it does? Is it allows kind of that shame that you maybe feel about it to finally come out in the open. And I think kind of the cure for shame is vocalizing it. And then at that point in time, you got to create your limit list. So where are all these limits that are holding you back, that are keeping you stagnant? And they could be very small things, So when I started this with the van life, I looked at limits that were associated with my 4 core relationships in life: my relationship to myself, my relationship with community or others, my relationship with God or the unknown, and my relationship with death. And I started looking at all those, and death might scare you a little bit, but that was also me looking at my relationship with alcohol, my relationship with nicotine, my relationship with all of these things that to me were kind of like, I'm walking myself one step closer to death and I'm choosing it. Why am I choosing it? Right? And so whatever those limits are, create a limit list. So some things on my limit list were, living in a van full time for a year. When it comes to my relationship with myself, right? More stuff with self-worth came up. That's when I decided I'm going to try not doing Botox. I'm going to try getting back to my natural hair color. They don't have to be these big items or these big things, but it's about taking these small little steps that are now going to get you a lot closer. It's all about action. If we don't initially start to take action, we're never going to get anywhere. But the second you start taking even just the littlest step, right? So maybe you do want to buy a van. Maybe you've always had that dream, but you tell yourself, I can't do that because I got family, I got 2 dogs, I got a wife. I can't do that. Well, why don't you sit down with your calendar and plan out a weekend where you can go rent one of these vans and you can go on a little weekend trip, either by yourself, with your wife, with the kids, whatever the case may be. We think that life has to be one way or the other, but it doesn't. That's your limit. That's the limit you got to overcome. And you do that by creating your limit list and taking small, consistent action. And you know what that does? Over time, that gets you to trust yourself. And when you start to trust yourself, you naturally begin to make more of these decisions over time. And that's when you start to find yourself in alignment.
So good. No, I mean, like it really, I mean, like you hit so many I come into these conversations so many times. Like you do a podcast with somebody, and by the way, this is why I love podcasting, because it forces you to shut everything off, right? And you just get to connect with somebody one-on-one in a way that we just don't get to do ever in life again. And somebody who, and thank you for doing this. This has been amazing.
Thank you.
But like I come into these and it's usually like I'm the interviewer and I'm here to learn and I want to get to know, but it's very, very seldom that I personally get emotional in the story. And you've gotten me emotional in several points here. And so thank you for being able to get that out of me. I didn't expect that. And I really appreciate you for being, it's because you're so vulnerable and it's so real about this. You hinted on something and you probably can't tell us everything, but let's do this. I want people to know your story. And I want people to be able to follow your story. Where do they find you, Megan?
I am Megan Anderson on Instagram. That's what it is on Facebook. TheMeganAnderson.com is my website. So you can find me. You can find me all over the place.
And so you talked about this Limitless. This is the next iteration of your branding and your story and what you're putting together. Where do we find that? Where should we be on the lookout? Just follow your Instagram and you'll be talking about it there as things get closer.
I will be talking about it there. When's this podcast going to launch, you think?
It'll probably launch in 2 weeks.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You'll find out. Follow me on social media.
Okay.
Stay tuned. It'll be taking place, but essentially the next version of it is, I told you, I've been dipping my toe into the waters of this, even though people look at it and they're like, whoa, you live in a van, you totally did it. Nope, that's me touching my toe in the water of this lifestyle. I'm about ready to dive fully in.
Good for you. Good for you. You inspired so many people, right? Like people come to these podcasts and are like, how do I grind? How do I do it more? And you're talking about life and you're talking about being real and you're talking about self-worth and that's what it's about. And so you never know where these conversations are going to go. I thought we were going to be talking about like how you eat. And by the way, like literally last night, I want to tell you this. I was weighing out my macros and there was like, I needed like 8 ounces of chicken and there was like 8 point whatever. And I was like literally tearing a piece of chicken off and throwing it away because I needed to have 8, why am I living my life this way? But no, I feel you on that. So there's so many ways that we connected on the story, but I want to thank you for taking the time. And for those of you that are listening, if you were inspired by Megan's journey and her story, take a snapshot of this podcast and DM us. I'm not doing, put it in your stories actually on Instagram and then, tag us and DM us if you have questions. But thank you for being here and thank you for listening. But again, if you like it, please let us know, so that we can give you more like this. And Megan, gosh, I really appreciate that we finally, like years and years later, I think I looked at it, was like 2022 or something that we initially reached out. No, not your faults. Look, my job is to follow up. I didn't follow up, but I'm glad we finally did it because this was the story to do.
It was.
So congratulations.
This was the right time.
Everything's about timing. It's a beautiful thing. But I'm so glad we did it. So thank you. And anything else you want to plug before we jump off?
I just want to encourage everyone to start writing your Limitless. Starts with brutal fucking honesty. Start there.
There you go. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening and DM us if you have any questions. Take care.